voice, speak softly. In other words, he gives me the okay to say whatever it is I want to say, whichever way I want to say it. The criticism comes afterwards when he sees the video. And the third thing, and I think it's the most important thing, is that I always keep in mind what the Rebbe has said to me over the years, and that's lo lefached, because he said it to me great number of times. Do not be afraid. If you have something to say, say it. Good beginning? Are we okay? Okay. It is a great honor and privilege to be hosted by this phenomenal convention that has successfully combined all the elements of wisdom, emotion, and knowledge in a totally inspirational 3 days. To state it in the words of David HaMelech, Hinei ma tov u'mana'im shevet achim gam yachad. How good and how pleasant it is when brothers dwell together. And he goes on in the same psalm and says, Ketal Hermon she'ored al hararei Zion. Like the dew of Mount Hermon in the Golan, which comes down upon the mountains of Zion, Yerushalayim. Ki sham tziva Hashem et habracha chayim ad olam. For it is there that God has commanded the blessing, life unto eternity. David HaMelech has reminded us here how good and how pleasant it was in the past, and how good and pleasant it will be again when those now separated physically by dispersion, who have nevertheless remained brothers by virtue of the spiritual unity of their convictions, their principles, and endeavors in life, will also dwell together physically once more in one land. Herein also lies the thought that such a reunion in our own land can be good and blessed only if we enter the land and dwell in it as brothers, united in spirit. And such unity can be attained only if we all, without reservation, rally around the Torah, which is the divine law, and support Eretz Yisrael, which is the common inheritance of us all. It is not by chance that the Hermon in the Golan is mentioned in the psalm. For the dew of Hermon is the dew which descends upon the peaks of Hermon, because they are part of the mountain chain comprising Zion, Yerushalayim. For there God has commanded blessing and eternal life. It is from Yerushalayim, from Zion, that blessings and life extend over all the land to its outermost borders. I bring to you greetings from Eretz Yisrael. Eretz asher Hashem Elokecha doresh ota tamid. Einei Hashem Elokecha ba bereishit hashana ba'ad acharit hashana. The land in which God's eyes are continuously, from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. A land flowing with milk and honey, as our Holy Torah describes it. A land whose turmoils and tribulations of the past form a history of endless challenges, bravery, countless wars, and all too brief periods of peace and tranquility. In particular, I bring to you the message of the people in the Golan Heights, a strip of land 20 kilometers in width, about 10 miles, who for the past 5 years have lived their lives with the uncertainty of the wandering Jew. Not that for a moment we doubted our legitimate rights to the land in question, for we as Torah-observant Jews know that this land, known in the Torah as Chevel HaBashan, was promised to Avraham Avinu, Abraham, and was settled by half of the tribe of Manasseh until the destruction of the first temple. Not for a moment did we forget the Jews who sacrificed their lives in the ancient capital of the Golan, Gamla, in order to forestall the Roman capture of Jerusalem. Gamla, built in the year 81 before the Common Era by the Hashmonaite king Alexander Yanai, and serving as the capital for close to 150 years. Gamla built on a steep mountain resembling a camel, and therefore its name Gamla. 4,000 Jews were killed by the Romans, and another 5,000 perished while jumping off the peaks in order not to be captured by the Romans. Only 2 women survived to tell the tale, as reflected by Josephus in his book, War of the Jews. In addition, coins uncovered at the site in recent years bear the picture on one side of a goblet, similar to goblets appearing on coins minted in Jerusalem in those days, while on the other side, the inscription reads, "To the redemption of Holy Jerusalem." This discovery, along with 26 Batei Knesset in the Golan, on which one is inscribed, Ze Beit Midrasho Shel Elazar HaKapar, mikvos discovered in Gamla themselves and uncovered, certify the lifeline connection between Yerushalayim and the Golan that existed 2,000 years ago, as it does today. In the year 67, Gamla fell, and in 1967, during the Six-Day War, it was recaptured. Not for a moment did we forget that the 3 tributaries of the Kinneret Basin, the Chatzpani, the Banyas, and the Dan, Rashi Tevot Chabad, okay, the initials of Chabad, supply Israel with 1/3 of its water supply, and whose diversion by the Syrians in 1967 caused the outbreak of the Six-Day War. The present borders ensure that the vital water supply, which unfortunately today is at an all-time low, will not be tampered with. A few small vital facts about the water supply. 500 million cubic meters of water are supplied by the Chatzpani, which originates in Lebanon and is controlled by the Syrians, the Dan, which originates 10 kilometers south of the Green Line, and the Banyas, which originates in the Golan, and any concession would return it into the hands of the Syrians. Another 300 million cubic meters come from other water sources that originate in the Golan. 100 million cubic meters come from rainwater, which unfortunately this year we are facing a terrible drought in Eretz Yisrael. Taking into consideration that 250 million meters evaporate in the Kinneret, approximately 1/3 of Israel's water supply comes directly from the Kinneret. We may compare the Kinneret, the one and only lake in Eretz Yisrael, to a heart, with its main artery being the national water carrier, which supplies the central part of Eretz Yisrael as well as the Negev with its water supply. A very small portion of the water is utilized in the Kinneret area. Most of the water reaches the faucets in Tel Aviv and in the Negev. Not for a moment did we forget that peace has been preserved in the Golan due to our sovereignty in the region. The strategical and tactical balances of the Israeli forces due to the topographic conditions created in the region with the present boundaries has averted possible confrontations. In the southern Golan, the Yarmouk and the Rokard rivers provide natural boundaries. No infantry can get across those rivers. On the eastern front of the Golan, favorable tactical conditions are formed by a chain of mountains, ranging from the Hermon in the north, followed by the Hermonite a little bit southern to the Hermon, followed by the mountain of Avital, followed by the mountain of Faras, followed by the mountain of Tel Jukdar, and finally Tel Saki. And all of us know that the Gulf War was not won by the airstrikes. The Gulf War was won on land, by tanks going through and by infantry. Today, we have this topographical region with these mountains and our sovereignty. Giving this up would let the Syrians come right through with their tanks, and be not mistaken. This strategic balance is achieved simply because Israeli forces sitting 60 kilometers from Damascus pose a constant threat, stabilizing the region, a threat to Syria, of course, and deterring Syrian intentions to attack. Any observer aware of these conditions realizes that there is no possibility for territorial concessions now or ever. Not for a moment did we forget who the cruel Antiochus of our times, Hafez el-Assad, is. Assad, whose tyrannical regime was directly responsible for the oppression of Syrian Jews, as well as the massacre of over 10,000 of his own people in the city of Hamat in 1982, as a punishment for the Muslim uprising there. 20% of the cocaine supply and related drug trafficking offenses are attributed to the Syrians, with Rifat Assad, Assad's brother, and head of the armed forces of Syria, leading the way. Dangerous and life-threatening drugs are being grown right now in the Bekaa Valley in Lebanon. Small note, Syria is still on the list of pro-terrorist countries. But most of all, we remember God's promise appearing in this past week's Parsha, Perek Vav, Pasuk Chet. והבאתי אתכם אל ארץ אשר נשאתי את ידי לתת אותה לאברהם, ליצחק וליעקב, ונתתי אותה לכם מורשה, אני השם. And I will bring you unto the land which I lifted up my hand to give it to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and I will give it to you for a heritage. The Rebbe constantly enforced our commitment not to give up even the smallest parcel of land, Ak Sha'al, which is ours, being the birthright and inheritance of all Jews. The Rebbe stressed many times his personal views based on Torah scriptures, the halacha of the Shulchan Aruch, the code of Jewish law, Hilchot Shabbos, Siman Shin Chav Tet, that if the enemy, whose intentions to capture and possess the land come to the borders of the outlying cities and suburbs, even if they claim to come on business matters of tevin v'kash, straw and animal feed, even on Shabbos, we are instructed to desecrate the Shabbos in order to protect our boundaries in the fear that they may capture the city and from there continue on to capturing other cities. In short, a matter of pikuach nefesh, saving lives. Every Jew, whether he lives in Israel or outside of it, has the right of ownership on each parcel of land in Israel. His age, position matter not. His connection to Eretz Yisrael exists whether he is in the position of Golus or not. This is part of the birthright given to us by the Kadosh Baruch Hu as an inheritance handed down from Avraham Avinu. And no matter what acts are done or not done, this inheritance is passed down from generation to generation. Eretz Yisrael belongs to the Jews living in the diaspora, just as it belongs to the Jews living there. So, it is clear that there is a duty facing every Jew, no matter where he may reside, to protest and say his opinion regarding matters concerning his inheritance. And if he remains silent and does not protest, His silence will result in his shirking of responsibility towards the events happening there, as quoted by the Rebbe in one of his sichos, and beautifully verbalized by Mordechai in Shushan Habira, when he says to Esther Hamalka, "Do not imagine that you will be able to escape in the king's palace any more than the rest of the Jews. For if you persist in keeping silent at a time like this, relief and deliverance will come to the Jews from some other place, while you and your father's house will perish." We are all Yerushalayim. We are all Tel Aviv. We are all Chispin in the Golan Heights. For Torah Yisrael, the Torah of Israel, Am Yisrael, the nation of Israel, and Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, are one. And it matters not if we live in Chicago, Paris, Kansas, or South Africa. Our heartbeat is one. Yesterday, our heart ached in the Soviet Union. On Hanukkah, our heart ached with the Tzur family, living in Beit El, who were ruthlessly murdered just for the sin of traveling in Yud HaVashon. Our heart ached last week in the Golan. We buried our doctor's son. While his infantry division went up on a mokesh in the Bitachon, the Ezra Bitachon in Lebanon. Today, our heart aches in Hebron. First place in Eretz Yisrael that came under the ownership of Abraham Avinu. I'm sorry about this. I get very emotional. As indicated in Bereshis. And after this, Abraham buried Sarah, his wife, in the cave, in the field of Machpelah, before Mamre, the same as Hebron in the land of Canaan. And there was made sure this field and the cave that is therein unto Abraham for a possession of a burying place. And it is said in the Midrash, this is one of the three places that the nations of the world cannot usurp from Israel: Marat HaMachpelah, Beis HaMikdash, and Shechem, Yosef's burial place. We look to our weekly Parasha Va'era, our last week's Parasha Va'era, as a reinforcement to this eternal claim. As is stated, "And I appeared unto Abraham, Va'era el Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov." The Rebbe in Likutei Sichos quotes the Mishnah in Masechet Yoma, where it is stated that the assistant to the Kohen said to his assistant, the assistant said to the Kohen, "Go forth from a high area in the Beit HaMikdash and see if the time has arrived for slaughtering the Korban Tamid." If it had arrived, he who was on the lookout said, "It is daylight." And then the question was asked, "Until Hebron?" That is to say, has the light reached Hebron? And this was specifically to bring forth the zechus, the privilege of Yeshenei Hebron, those buried in Hebron, in order to expedite and help with the acceptance of the sacrifices, and in particular the Korban Tamid, the daily sacrifice. The same Hebron in question today. Only a Jewish person, not tuned into his own heart, could disregard the pain and not cry out for the mercy of God to end our galus, bring Mashiach Tzidkenu, and bring us to the fruition of days past where Judah and Israel dwelt safely, every man under his vine and under his fig tree, from Dan even to Beersheba, all the days of Solomon, Vayeshev Yehuda v'Yisrael lebetach, ish tachat gafno, v'tachat te'enato, midan v'ad Beersheba, kol yimei Shlomo. The pride of being a Jew has unfortunately diminished in the last few generations among our brothers, with assimilation occurring at an astounding rate, while Torah and mitzvot are held at a distance. Unfortunately, the Arabs, l'havdil, have increased their sense of pride in land and religion. Ramadan, the fast of the Muslims being celebrated this month, has become an international issue. They come to the international tables and say, no food. And because of this increased sense of pride in land and religion, they have been audacious in their demands, and they have been so far-reaching as to singe our ears even listening to their demands. While us, in Eretz Yisrael, on the fast of Tevet last year, to the dismay of the religious Jews, greeted King Hussein of Jordan with food and drink in Eretz Yisrael. Let us look back at our glorious past as a nation, when Moshe Rabbeinu, Orel Sfatayim, stood before Paro and the great nation of Egypt. Poor Moshe came as a single person there in front of Paro. Didn't even have his nation behind him. And as an answer to Paro's question, but who are they that shall go? And Moshe said, with our young and with our old we will go, with our sons and with our daughters, with our flocks and with our herds will we go. No hesitance, but rather strong and unrelenting determination. B'nareinu b'zkenenu nelech, b'banenu ubnosenu, b'tzonenu ub'bkarenu nelech. Let us not be disillusioned by words with no substance, peace, coexistence, brotherly love, for they are only letters that form the words and hold no promise for their dictionary interpretations. I can't imagine being able to stand here 25 years ago and in my wildest dreams envision the next 25 years of my life. Perhaps the words of a famous poem by the American author Robert Frost can enlighten us in regard to the crossroads we faced a decade or two or three ago, for those of us in our 40s, 50s, and older, and for the crucial decisions facing those of us in the younger generation. The road not taken. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler. Long I stood and looked down one as far as I could, to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim because it was grassy and wanted wear, though as far that the passing there had worn them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay, in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on the way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. This poem concerns a choice made between two roads by a person out walking in the woods. He would like to explore both roads, perhaps the road of Torah and mitzvos, perhaps the secular road. He tells himself that he will explore one and then come back and explore the other, but he knows that he shall probably be unable to do so. We realize that this choice is one that will make a great difference in our lives and will result through the years in a large difference in the kind of experience one knows. For some of us, the choice is clear from birth, while for others, the choice becomes apparent somewhere down the path of life. However, we as Neshei and Benos Chabad know, B'chol drachecha da'ehu, v'hu yishar orchotecha. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he will direct thy paths. And so, my path so far has been directly influenced and guided by the Rebbe's wisdom. The road less traveled by has indeed characterized the last 25 years of my life. As a young bride in 1972, my husband and I settled down in Dallas, Texas, where he served as principal for a Hebrew day school while I completed my college degree. As though that were not exciting enough, the challenge of the Air Force intrigued my husband, and after much convincing and a mistaken feeling that the Air Force would bring me closer to New York and my family, I agreed. Well, one fine day, after coming home from work and awaiting our Air Force assignment, Yisrael, my husband, had a lovely dinner prepared and was overly gracious, telling me he had some exciting news about our assignment. New Jersey, perhaps Connecticut, well, Pennsylvania would be fine too. Not seeing an immediate response, I said, excitedly, even closer to home? And he, in a semi-exasperated, somewhat fearful voice, said, no. Even better and more exciting, Alaska. Alaska, as in A-L-A-S-K-A? Eskimos, igloos, freezing weather? I said, there must be some mistake. Well, the first thing that came to yours truly's mind was, what are we going to do about a mikveh? I had heard of the Mesiras Nefesh of many women who used lakes and seas, but I knew somehow that Alaska was frozen. I looked at Yisrael, using the simplistic, naive mind of a 20-year-old, I simply said, well, call him up and tell him to change the assignment. Somehow my husband saw the picture a bit clearer than myself, but in order to appease me said, fine, I'll call and see what can be done. A bit hesitantly, Yisrael picked up the phone and called Washington, D.C. in an effort to speak to the general in charge about changing the assignment. Slowly and surely, he expressed his wife's feelings that Alaska was a bit too exotic for her tastes, and perhaps they would reconsider something in the lower 48, as the rest of the U.S. is called in Alaska. I saw Yisrael nodding his head and immediately felt easier. Slowly but surely, the nodding faded, and Yisrael turned to me and said, will Thailand be okay? I paled and said, that's the alternative? Well, it's that or Alaska. Knowing that the U.S. was at war in Vietnam close by, I quickly opted for Alaska. Then Yisrael, talking to a general, a galach there in Washington, D.C., brings up the matter of the mikveh. Even I thought that was absurd. And the general assured him, no problem, you'll get your mixer. And so, we go on for 3 days. And so, after many long, drawn-out goodbyes, we loaded up our Chevy Impala and left New York City for the first really big adventure in our lives. Both my husband and myself grew up in modern Orthodox families, but had no real connection at that point to Chabad, even though my husband grew up in Crown Heights. Enter phase 2 of our journey to Alaska. My parents, Shivadul Chaim Arukim, may God grant them long and healthy lives, are Holocaust survivors. Both were in the concentration camps in Auschwitz. Both lost their parents, brothers and sisters, and were left totally orphaned at the end of the war. My mother then, a young girl, was adopted by a very lovely childless couple in St. Paul, Minnesota, Adele and Sam Goldberg, Baruch, while she attended McAllister College. While traveling up to Anchorage, we naturally went to visit the Goldbergs because, to us, they were the only grandparents we ever knew. Upon arriving in St. Paul, we were met by the Goldbergs, who insisted that we meet 2 new rabbis that had opened up the local Chabad house, and perhaps we would even be more comfortable staying there. I said, Yisrael, let's just pack up and move on. I'm not into meeting, long-bearded rabbis now. We have a long distance to go. We'll just tell them we're leaving today. But Yisrael said, no, they're so nice. They don't have children. Let's just stay another day. And so I agreed to meet these 2 bearded rabbis. We then had the great zchus of meeting Rabbi Moshe Feller and Rabbi Gershon Grossbaum, who gave us our first introduction into the hospitality, warmth, and all-encompassing concern of Chabad. They were very interested in knowing everything about our assignment, and when we told them that the mikveh was a major problem, Gershon simply said, if you can get me up there, I'll build the mikveh. Never in my life had I met such giving and caring people. In New York, when we were still in New York waiting to go to Alaska, my husband got in contact with this board and that board and the OU, and they said, no problem, we're patenting a portable mikveh, you'll have it, maybe it'll be 8 years, maybe it'll be 10 years, but we're working on it. Here, they said, no problem, you get us up there, you'll have a mikveh. And then he said, have you written to the Rebbe? I said, yeah, I put in a letter last week. It was, very nice. I wrote to him everything that we're doing. He said, you wrote to the Rebbe? Yeah, I said, Rabbi Schwartz, the rabbi in my shul. And I had written, I'm ignoring this side. That's very bad. My head is going this way. But anyway, he says, have you written to the Rebbe? I said to myself, why in heaven's name would somebody sitting in New York be interested in what I'm going to be doing in Alaska? But he was persistent, Gershon. He looked like a nice man, so we promised him. One of those promises, when we get around to it, we will definitely put a letter in. To tell you the truth now, when I look back, I had so little understanding of what the Rebbe was that I was astounded to think that someone who we didn't know personally would be interested in what we were doing. And so we continued on our journey with the promise that a mikveh indeed would be a reality. When we arrived in Anchorage with our 6-month supply of meat and Chol of Yisrael, we were met by representatives of the Jewish community who informed us immediately that the community was basically reformed and that we would have to adjust. Slowly but surely, minyanim, mechitzas, bar mitzvah classes became a reality. Everything with much good feeling and a positive attitude between the Jewish population. I just remember saying to Yisrael on the plane from Seattle to Alaska on our way up for the first time, Yisrael, I really hope that for the next couple of months, only girls will be born, because I don't know how we're going to get a mile up to this place. Sure enough, the first week we're there, we get a call from a very nice man saying, Mazel Tov. And I held my breath. Oh, are you getting married? No, I just had a baby boy. And Israel went to talk to him, and he said, well, cost about $300 to bring the oil up for Seattle. I mean, this was somebody that would have been very happy to use the local doctor. And Yisrael came home to me and said, Miriam, we're shelling out the $300. I said, Yisrael, it's very nice of you, but what are we going to shell out the $300 every time somebody has a boy here? And he says, I'll never forget this because this shows the hashgacha pratis. My husband looked at me and he said, you're going to have a schus, we're going to have a schus to be part of this Talmid Chacham. And I looked at him and I said, you must be crazy. We are in Alaska. What kind of Talmid Chacham are you talking about? He asked, the boy today lives in Yerushalayim and is a Talmid Chacham. Before we left Alaska, his whole family moved to Eretz Yisrael. And so, sometimes you think nothing is going to come of it, and a lot comes of it. Well, getting back to our mikvah story. Our non-existent mikvah. Yisrael said, don't worry, we're working on it. I said, fine. One day he comes home, he says, well, I'm going to try and cut emergency orders for you to get on one of these C-130 transport planes. I said, sweetheart, whatever it is that you want to do, do it. No, I said, C-130 transport planes. I thought that he's talking about a TWA first class ticket. Turns out he went to the Lutheran base chaplain and said, look, I need to cut emergency orders for my wife to fly down to Seattle. And the Galach heard the circumstances, and he said, if that's not an emergency, I don't know what is. And so, I proceeded out to the airport at Elmendorf Air Force Base. And the minute I saw the plane, I knew I was in trouble. They were loading on this huge military equipment. I said, exactly where am I supposed to sit, Yisrael? There are no windows on this plane. He says, Miriam, don't worry, this is fine. You're going to see, you're going to love it. Well, I got on this plane, and it was worse than I expected. You know, they strap you in sideways instead of facing forward. The boxes are, you know, looking straight at you. I just felt everything would fall right on me. Probably find my remains in the morning. Anyway, I got on this plane, and an hour into the flight, I guess the two pilots had a little Rahmanis on me, came to the back and said, would you like to sit with us? I said, oh, that would be great. And they gave me a pair of earphones and sat me up front with them. Naturally, I had to give them an explanation of what I was doing on the plane. You know, but after a while, if you explain to somebody you're traveling 4,000 miles for a bath, they think you're a little tra-la-la anyway. We can all laugh about it now. Well, getting back to our mikveh that was being built. Rabbi Gershon Grosbaum came up to Alaska and spent a month with us and built the mikveh. He had the whole engineering corps on their feet, and it was just wonderful. On March 21st, 1974, Rabbi Handel, Shibadel Chaim Arukim from Montreal, came to be machshir the mikveh, personally built by Rabbi Gershon Grosbaum with the help of the engineering squad of Elmendorf Air Force Base, and located, okay, hold your seats, ladies, in the Catholic chapel. Are you all still with me? We are going to get serious in a little while. It was precisely at this time, and after writing, let me see, did I leave anything out that I wanted to tell you about? I made, Anyway, it was precisely at this time, and after writing to inform the Rebbe that we received a long, encouraging letter, from the Rebbe, one which has served as a guideline for the continuation of our shlichus even to this day. And I would like to read this letter with your permission. By the way, this is the book that my husband wrote about our experiences. It should be coming out in English shortly, the next 10, 15 years. It took 25 years to get this thing out in Hebrew, so I imagine the next 15 years you'll be seeing it in English. Anyway. Okay, it says, by the grace of God, Rosh Chodesh Sivan, 5734, Brooklyn, New York. Please stand. Still a little new, in this field, so excuse me. Chaplain Israel Haber, Elmendorf Air Force Base, Alaska. And this is really, this letter shows how much the Rebbe knew about Air Force life and what it was like to be in the Air Force. Greetings and blessings. Due to a very crowded schedule, this is my first opportunity of congratulating you on your extraordinary schus of initiating the project of the first mikveh in Anchorage for the Alaskan Jewish community, which you accomplished with God's help, as I am informed by our mutual friends, the Rabbanim, who flew in to participate in this great event. As for the importance of this matter, I need hardly emphasize it to you, since your own initiative is best proof of being fully aware of it. However, on the basis of the dictum of our sages, encourage the energetic, I wish to express my confident hope that you are doing all you can to make the mikveh a busy place, frequented regularly not only by the women who directly benefit from your good influence, but also by their friends and acquaintances who will be induced by them to follow their example. And while this kind of religious inspiration is a must wherever Jews live, it is even more so in the city and state where the mikveh has just been established for the first time. It is well to bear in mind that a Jewish heart is always awake and responsive to Torah and mitzvahs. It is significant in this case that the one who merited the great schus of establishing the mikveh is a person in military service. For military service, by definition and practice, very aptly illustrates the basic principle of commitment to Torah and mitzvahs, namely, Naaseh, we will do, and then V'nishma, we will understand. Moreover, the soldier's duty to carry out the orders of a commanding officer and carry them out promptly and to the best of his ability is in no way inhibited by the fact that in civilian life, the soldier may be vastly superior to his commanding officer in many respects. Nor does such a circumstance diminish in the least the soldier's self-esteem to obeying the order. On the contrary, by not allowing any personal views to interfere with his military duties, he demonstrates his strength of character and integrity. The same is true in the area of Torah and mitzvot. One may be a very rich man in the ordinary sense, or rich in knowledge of the sciences or in other achievements in public life. Yet, when it comes to halacha, the law of Torah conduct, he accepts it with complete obedience and dedication on the authority of a fellow Jew who has consecrated all his life to Torah study and Torah living and is eminently qualified to transmit the word of God, the halacha. A further point which characterizes military discipline also has a bearing on the subject of Torah and mitzvot. In the military, no soldier can claim that his conduct is his personal affair, nor can he take the attitude that there are many other soldiers to carry out military assignments, but he will do as he pleases. For it has often been demonstrated in military history how one action of a single soldier could have far-reaching consequences for an entire army and country. Every Jew is a soldier in the army of God. As it is often emphasized in this week's Sedra, Kol Yotzei Tzava, everyone going forth as a soldier, and he is bound by the same two basic rules, to carry out God's commandments promptly and fully without question, Naaseh before V'nishma, and to recognize his responsibility to his people, All Jews are responsible for one another. Hence the consequences of one good deed. To quote the Rambam, every person should always consider himself and the whole world as equibalanced. Hence, when he does one mitzvah, he tips the scale in favor of himself and of the whole world. May you go from strength to strength in all that has been said above in all aspects of Yiddishkeit, which includes also influence to promote among non-Jews the observance of the basic 7 mitzvos, with all their numerous ramifications, which are incumbent upon all mankind in the foundation of human society. At this time before Shavuos, I wish you and all your brethren at the base, as well as the community, a happy and inspiring festival of receiving our Torah with the traditional Hasidic blessing to receive the Torah with joy and inwardness, with esteem and blessing. Rav Menachem Schneerson. That's it. Okay, going back to what was happening in Alaska, there were several things that were really, really difficult to cope with. And that was the long nights, very, very long nights, where we would light candles at 2 p.m. in the afternoon and make Havdalah the next day at 3 o'clock and just go around, shopping afterwards at 3 o'clock on Saturday afternoon. It was like really weird. And the opposite in the summer, when we brought in the Shabbos like at 12 o'clock midnight, and then we made Havdalah the next day at 1 in the morning. It was a really different kind of experience. After our stay in Alaska, which took 3 years, during which time I still did not have any children, we were encouraged by Rabbi Gershon Grosdown and Rabbi Feller to go make a visit to the Rebbe. And I can't tell you today how influential that meeting was, how it inspired me for many years to come. We went to 770, and we were standing on the line. We saw a lot of people there, and everybody was giving us advice. Stand here, do this, do that. Well, I figured, this is the Rebbe and everything, but I didn't really understand what was happening. So we walked into the office of the Rebbe, and my husband, sticks out his hand to shake the Rebbe's hand, And then the Rebbe says, "Would you like to sit down?" Well, thank God he said no. But, we really didn't know what was going on. And the thing was that Rabbi Leibel Bistritsky, before we went in, he said, "Don't leave until you get the bracha." I said, "What do you mean by that?" "Don't leave the office." So I said, "What, am I supposed to force the Rebbe to say something?" I really didn't understand the whole tactic involved. Anyway, we went in, and the Rebbe looked directly at me and started talking about the work I do. And I don't recall really telling him about the work I did. And he said how important it was for me to pursue a career with special education children and to work with them, and the importance of dealing with them as human beings and giving them the respect that they deserve. And that always stays with me every day of my life when I work in the school system in Eretz Yisrael, and I make sure that my teachers, one of the first lessons that they learn from me is that every day, every minute, treat your students with respect. And I think that's very important. Anyway, the Rebbe went on to talk to me about my work, and then he turned to my husband and spoke to him a while about what kind of mitzvah I'm to do in Alaska. And finally, he wasn't really saying anything about children, so I started giving my husband these little kicks, in the foot, because I wasn't going to come back to New York the next day. We were in Anchorage, Alaska. And my husband said, "Did you see the Petek?" What kind of question is that? Of course the Rebbe saw the Petek, we gave a little note in before we went in. And the Rebbe blessed us with a beautiful blessing for, matter of fact, he said, "And I give you a blessing for boys that won't be just chaplains in the Air Force, but rabbanim of big cities, and girls that will teach other girls to use the mikvah." A really beautiful bracha. And so we left and we went back to Anchorage, and after a few months I said to Gershon, gave a bracha, but look, And Gershon looked at me. He said, Miriam, you got the bracha? Forget about this problem. And sure enough, this is a riot, the last month that we were in Alaska, I went to the doctor and I got the good news that I was expecting. And my husband at that time was in his office. And I picked up the phone and he said to me, Miriam, you're not going to believe this. We have 2 guests sitting here in my office this minute. They came from, what did he tell me? They came from the yeshiva in Crown Heights to help you with mitzvah. Very nice fellow by the name of Lippa Brennan. And another very nice man by the name of Nehemiah Kessler, Zichrono Baruch. I said, well, listen, Yisrael, we're having a guest for Pesach. He says, it's just like your parents. We haven't even left this place, and they're already signing up for California for Pesach. I said, it's not my parents, it's our child. And I think he must have dropped the phone in the room because Lippa got him a glass of water very fast. So even there, we had the Chabad connection, that they were there even when we had this great, great news. And the connection between Lippa and my husband is very strong, and to this day, to the fact, and he'll kill me if he hears this story. When he heard that I was coming to Eretz Yisrael, he says, listen, you know, my son, by mistake, tore up the tape of his Pirchei Miami. You don't happen to have a copy of that tape? And I said, as a matter of fact, we do. So he says, could you put it in the suitcase? So we're very, very close with them. And this closeness has stemmed from the visit to Alaska. So to make a long story short, we traveled from Alaska. We were followed by another frum rabbi who took up our place. The other thing is the Rebbe asked me personally when I was in his office to do a special favor for him. And what was the favor? To please go and ask the women who needed to use the mikveh just one time, elderly women, to please use the mikveh once. It didn't sound bad when he said it, but when I went out of the office, I said, how am I going to do that? And Yisrael said, don't worry, if the Rebbe said it, you'll have the koiches. And the truth is that I really did try and do the best job I could for the time that we were in Alaska. Then we continued to California, where we were stationed in not far from San Francisco for 2 years, and my oldest son, Meir Moshe, was born. And finally, we decided we had set a goal for ourselves, 5 years of marriage, and then we were going to Eretz Yisrael. And so, in my 8th month with my second child, we started our journey to Eretz Yisrael. No job, very little money, but a lot of good intention. And first few years we settled in Tiberia. And finally, when my son had to start first grade, I decided that I wanted to give him a different kind of education. An education for the love of the land. When I mean the land, I mean the Adama itself. Because I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and I didn't have such a big garden, but I wanted to grow my own oranges and my own pomegranates, my own olives and all that stuff. And I wanted for them to have the love of the land also. And so we moved to this place called Chispim. And the truth of the matter is that 15 years ago, you had to have a really big vision to see what the place was going to look like 15 years later. We lived without a telephone for 8 years in a place that was like 60 meters wide. And this is how our life went on until we were able to expand and build our home. And as I said, the last 5 years, we have been living in terrible uncertainty because of the situation. But even there, we have had the bracha of the Rebbe, made the bracha of the Rebbe to us in the Golan Heights, which reads as follows. I know some of you may have seen this already. Am I going to get it up again? Anyway, I'll do a free translation. Okay, so the Rebbe, this is a free translation. The Rebbe called on all the residents of the Golan Heights to be strong, not to be afraid from all the events happening in the past few months, and to stay strong in their places, in the mesima, in the job of keeping their shlichus, of settling Eretz Yisrael until the Goyal Tzedek comes. And this little piece of paper was distributed all around the Golan and served as a tremendous inspiration for all people who knew that the Rebbe was behind us all the way and that we would stay firm in Eretz Yisrael. And this was made into a huge sign that we put on the roof of our house, which can be seen. I don't know, those of you who have visited me in Crispin, I think there's at least one person here, knows that this big sign, you can see it from everywhere on the yishuv, and it's provided a great inspiration. About a year and a half ago, when the situation was very, very bad, my husband decided to leave his job, his full-time job. He was working as a psychologist and the Ministry of Education, and decided that the time was right for us to open up a base Chabad full-time. And I can say, Baruch Hashem, I think we have a really beautiful Beit Chabad that is visited by many, many people, and it's very active. We have bring-ins and we have things for the children. And every Friday afternoon we gather all the kids because we don't want to conflict with the B'nai Akiva and everything else. Just a lot of goodwill. And the Rosh Yeshiva of the Hesder Yeshiva also goes hand in hand with us and happens to be my husband's chavrusa for Tanya. So Baruch Hashem, it's worked out very well, and we're very happy that we're able to provide this service in the Golan Heights. I would like to, got a little note here to wrap it up, so I won't be taking questions this evening. But anyway, I am gratified and honored that I was able to attend this magnificent convention that was filled with stimulating talks, Divrei Torah, women from all walks of life participating in a celebration of being part of Neshos and Benot Chabad. There's so many people here that I would like to thank. When Rabbi Moskowitz called me up several months ago and asked me to come here, I thought he had the wrong number. I thought, he was looking for a Chicago number and landed up with an Israeli number, and I really was very hesitant to accept this invitation, because I know that sitting here in this room are so many women, probably each and every one of you, who could be standing here instead of me and giving a lovely keynote address also. I walked in here on Friday afternoon not knowing anybody, literally, and I have met so many wonderful and nice people. I will go back with so many nice memories, and I hope there's a video because my husband's going to ask for this video, but I have met so many nice people, and you've really touched my life deeply. I've heard so many nice things, and I would like to make a special notation of the lovely evening I had last night with the Benot Chabad. You can be very, very proud of your girls. They really are wonderful. They really are wonderful. The talents, I don't even know where to begin saying thank you, so thank you to all of you. And thank you to Rabbi Moskowitz and everybody else who made it possible for me to come here on this trip. The talents, wisdom, and character of all of you make Neshos Chabad the praiseworthy organization it is today. I am confident, in the Rebbe's words, he said this many times, that the accomplishments in the past, including this marvelous convention weekend, will stimulate even greater ambitions in the future, in accordance with the saying of our sages, as brought forth by the Rebbe in his many letters, that he who has 100 desires 200, and having attained 200, not merely another 100, but 400. If this is human nature in material things, how much more should it be in regard to real and eternal values of Torah and mitzvos? Our Parsha Va'era, last week's Parsha, contains the 4 key words indicating the redemption of Israel. V'hotzeti, and I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. V'hitzalti, and I will deliver you from their bondage. V'ga'alti, and I will redeem you with an outstretched arm. V'lakachti, and I will take you to me for a people. It is in the 5th word of redemption, the Hevesi, the Heveti etchem el haaretz, and I will bring you into the land, that we are made to understand that immediately after exiting Egypt, the actual Geula, the redemption of the future, started happening in accordance with the saying of the Friedricher Rebbe, Sheme'az Yitzias Mitzrayim Nosim El HaGeula Shel Ha'atid. We are ready in transit to the final redemption. I wish you and yours and all our brothers in your sphere of influence much success in all your endeavors, wherever you may be, And may others who see the good deeds that you do be influenced to do the same. And with God's help, may peace come to Eretz Israel with the speedy appearance of Mashiach Tzidkenu, who will bring the promise of V'natati shalom ba'aretz, and I will give peace in the land, V'olech etchem komimiyut, and you will go forward upright with the rebel leading the way. Amen. Thank you very much.
Miriam, your words were beautiful. Thank you so much for your important and inspiring words. We all need to hear the matzah in Eretz Yisrael, and please let us know how we could help you begashmias financially, and also beruchmias with our saying of Tehillim and learning Torah. The main course now is being served. Enjoy.